November is an Indigenous Heritage Month, so let's talk about some of my favorite books. Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex, and today we are talking about some of my favorite books by Indigenous authors. So in America, November is Indigenous Heritage Month, and so I'm going to share with you my top 5 favorite books by Indigenous authors today. I'm sorry about the lighting in here. It's a little weird. Like I had this like really bright spot on me. Just try to ignore it. So yeah, today is pretty cut and dry, pretty simple. I know some of these, or I mean like all of these are going to be repeats because I've already read them and I've reviewed them somewhere on my channel. But I know a few of these are repeats from the last couple times that I've said like these are my favorite books. I can't help if these are my favorites, but we do have some new ones on the list that are replacing some old ones this year, and I'm really excited to talk to you about them today. Make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week, and all we do on this channel is talk about books. So if you like listening to people talk about books, here I am every week doing just that for you. I will apologize because I have been a bit absent this month. It's not been good. Let's just put it like that. It's just not been a good month. I've been really busy. I've been really sick. I've been really not myself. So yeah, but I'm here now. We're gonna do this episode this week. Next week is gonna be the maybe series, I think, and then after that we're gonna do the wrap up. I have no idea what the November wrap up is gonna be like, so it will be a surprise for everybody. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. The first book on my list is Five Little Indians by Michelle Good. I read this book so long ago, and let me tell you all, I still think about this book. I think about this book constantly. It broke my heart. It was so sad and it was so moving. So this book is about 5 kids that end up all going to the same residential school, and we do get a bit about them at the residential school, like what they're experiencing, but most of the story happens after they've all been let out and meet up later in life. Like we're getting each of their stories individually, and then at some point all the stories kind of come together and we're seeing them all together on the page and dealing with their issues. I probably don't have to explain to you why this book is so emotional when we're talking about kids that were in a residential school being taken away from their parents and then living in a highly abusive environment and then kind of being chucked out when they reach a certain age and being expected to just figure everything out with very little to no resources, almost no family connections, and really no way forward. The reason I love this book so much is, one, because we're getting so many trauma responses to the same trauma, if that makes sense. Like, of course, each of these kids went through their own trials and struggles at the residential school, but they were all in the same environment. You know, they were all experiencing the same housing, the same situation, and to see how different Michelle Good got all of these reactions to that environment. And it's just a beautiful compilation of trauma responses. And I think that's something that people really don't do their due diligence on. A lot of times you see a trauma response being very universal, or, you know, this is a trauma response, and it's always kind of like the same cookie cutter thing over and over again, when there's a litany of responses that people can have to the same external situation. And I think this is a beautiful illustration of that. And I think Michelle Good really put the work in here, and you're just really telling these hard stories in a very beautiful and intricate way. If you have trouble with triggering content, this book would probably not be for you. I talk about this book in some of my trigger posts and things like that. This one has a lot of difficult content. It's insanely beautiful though. Michelle Good really just outdid herself. I truly love this book. The next book on the list is The Marrow, Thieves by Cherie, Dimaline. Okay, I love this book. I read it a while ago, and then I actually just read the sequel to it this year. I love this story, okay? We're following a teen, Frenchie, at the height of this kind of like epidemic that's happening in the US. So basically, everybody that's not an Indigenous person has forgotten how to dream. And so, of course, like, this doesn't really sound like that big of a deal, but over time it becomes a really big deal to people. Scientists have figured out that the cure for this lies in the bone marrow of Indigenous peoples. And so what they start doing is they start rounding them up and bringing them in and extracting their bone marrow to create a cure for everybody else. And so we're sort of in the height of this when Frenchie gets separated from his family. He had a brother and a mother and everything. They all got separated. And he ends up hooking up with another group of randoms, I would say. Like, everybody's just from everywhere, and they kind of made this little group together, and they're all traveling towards Canada, where they think there is a more heavily Indigenous population. They're like kind of fighting, being a resistant force to what's happening in the US. I mean, this is happening everywhere, but they think that there's more people in the north that they can like join and have safety in numbers. And so we're following Frenchie as he gets separated from his family and joining this new family. And along the way, we're getting all of their stories, their found stories, you know, how they all came together, where they're all from. There is a lot of really beautiful Indigenous heritage in this book that I absolutely love. And then we're sort of pressing in on this old look of residential schools and things like that. It's sort of a parallel to what did happen and like what is happening in this kind of dystopian universe or dystopian future. Cherie Dimaline really hit some high notes in this book, and I was really nervous to read the second book because the first book was so well done. I absolutely loved it. The second book completely ripped me in half, okay? I was sobbing through the whole thing. It completely lived up to the expectations of the first book. It really did. I was shocked. I was terrified. I was crying. The whole thing together was just absolutely beautiful. Cherie Dimaline hit it out of the park with this book. So if you're wanting something that's just like really different, because again, we're looking at a dystopian future here where Indigenous people are literally getting hunted for their bone marrow. If you're wanting something that's like really different, it also has a lot of really cool parallels in it, especially in the second book. A lot of really cool parallels in the second book. And also just like very richly steeped in Indigenous heritage. Oh, this is beautiful, okay? The next book on my list is Moon of the Crusted Snow by Waubgeshig Rice, and I think I read the sequel to this, which was like Moon of the Turning Leaves this year. So this is a duology as well. The Moon of the Crusted Snow was actually really interesting because it's about the world like shutting down. So it's also kind of post-apocalyptic as well, kind of like the Cherie Dimaline book. This one is a little bit more like in the moment though. We're seeing it all kind of break down in real time. Basically, we have this reservation of Indigenous people that live in like, it's either northern America or like, it might be in Canada. I feel like it's Canada. They're in the middle of winter basically, and the lights shut off. Everything shuts off. And at first I think, oh, it's just a blip, like it'll come back on, but then like nothing comes back on. And they're basically forced to like adapt to this new reality, keep their reservation running, keeping everybody healthy, fed, etc. But they're also hitting up with the demands of people coming from outside of their reservation, trying to get in, trying to break into this like bubble that they've created for themselves, the safety that they've made, and having to deal with the realities of the outside world trying to come in. A lot of weird stuff in this one, because people do crazy things during the apocalypse. You know, when the lights go out, when things get difficult, people will do a lot of really crazy things, and this is like a very good example of that, and a very good example of just because you're minding your own business doesn't mean everybody else is going to mind theirs. This book also had a lot of really great cultural heritage stuff happening in it that I absolutely loved. Waubgeshig Rice was terrific in this book, and actually like I didn't know there was going to be a sequel. Even after I finished it, I didn't feel like there was going to be a sequel. Like, I felt like he ended it in a way that was, like, very appropriate. I felt very happy. And then, months later, I found out there was going to be a sequel, and I was going to have to wait, like, a year for it. So, I very patiently waited. I read the sequel this spring, I think. And, I don't know. I definitely liked the first book better. I think the sequel was good. The pace was not that great though. We spent a lot of time at the front end of the book doing I don't know what. Like, honestly, I can't even tell you now when I think back on it what we were doing in the first half of the book, because everything sort of happened in the second half. But This one was really different. I really loved the post-apocalyptic feel of this because it felt very real. Whereas in like the Cherie Dimaline book, it is very almost fantastical because it doesn't seem plausible. You know, it's something that's so crazy that you're like, I can enjoy this by looking at it in a very fictional way. When you look at this one, the Waubgeshig Rice book, it's very real because this is something that could totally happen. And you can kind of see society just sort of come apart. And it's very realistic and scary because that is kind of what could happen. But yeah, you should definitely check this one out. Okay, if y'all thought that I was going to get through the post and not mention Stephen Graham Jones, you'd be wrong. Y'all knew Stephen Graham Jones would be on the list today. Usually I put up The Only Good Indians, which was the first Stephen Graham Jones book I read, but we're putting up My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones because I think this book is better. Everybody talks about The Only Good Indians like it was the first Stephen Graham Jones book I read. It got me hooked for sure. It was really well done. It was scary, it was gory, great work. Nobody talks about this book, and I don't know why. Nobody talks about My Heart is Chainsaw. This book is brilliant. The sequel was just as good. It's a trilogy. There's one more in the set that I haven't read yet, but so far both of these books have delivered. And I really love this book because it's insanely nostalgic for old school cult horror. So if you like stuff like that, this book is really going to hit for you, okay? So let me do the premise before I, keep going with how much I love this book. We have a female main character, Jade, living in a small, predominantly indigenous town, and across the lake, basically a bunch of very rich, non-indigenous people are cultivating it, putting that nicely, as a private living area. So basically you can only get out there by boat, building up their houses and everything. It's crazy. And so all of these kids that belong to these parents that are doing this are starting to come to her school. It's a very big culture shock for everybody. Basically, as soon as all of that starts happening, people in the town start dying. Jade has this coping mechanism of dealing with pretty much everything in her life by mirroring it with a horror film. She is a horror movie buff. This is how she deals with her trauma, and it's just insanely nostalgic. I absolutely love it. As people are dying, Jade brings it to her attention first, and then everybody else's, that this is quite clearly a final girl situation, and a final girl must be chosen to take down the bad guy that has infiltrated their town. And she makes it her mission to find the final girl and to groom her into the position of taking down the killer of the town. Lots of trauma in this book, okay? Jade is a walking trauma bomb, okay? And she does not apologize for it at all. She's got a lot of issues. I absolutely love her as a character. She was extremely well written. The cult horror nostalgia in this book is just dialed all the way up. I absolutely love it. If you love old school horror movies, you will love this book because of the references. The cultural representation on the page is astounding. There are so many cool folklore stories happening in this whole series. It doesn't stop with the first book. In the second book, we're getting even more that I absolutely love. And we're getting just a lot of colonizer vibes in this book too, because of what's happening across Indian Lake, which is where they live. And kind of this like blending of these two social groups, there's a lot happening. There's so much happening. Now, this book is a little bit long, but I did this on audio. I absolutely love the audio for this book. Now, the second book, which is Don't Fear the Reaper, I didn't like the audio, okay? It did not work for me in the way that the audio for the first book worked. So that was a little disappointing. Overall, though, I love this book. I like this more than The Only Good Indian. So, I'm really hoping people will start paying attention to this book a little bit more. It kind of gets out there. People start talking about it. It's really well done. Okay, this is the last one. It's Winter Counts by David Heska Wanbli Weiden. Okay, I read this year. I did this on audio. I love this book, okay? It was so different than what I was expecting. And when I read the synopsis and then I listened to the book, there was so much more happening in the book than what I was expecting from reading the synopsis. So, we have a male main character, and his whole job within his reservation is basically being a vigilante. So I kind of talked about this when I talked about the Roundhouse book. If you haven't read that, I suggest reading that. But the thing that some people don't always realize is that law, when it comes to Indigenous reservations, is very different than what happens in like normal society, like not reservation land, because the law doesn't apply the same way. Mostly because everything that has to do with Indigenous land is federal law. They talk about this a lot in the book, like it's a really big deal. They talk about it a lot in the Roundhouse book too, because it's a really big deal. If you've watched that film, now I can't remember what it's called, I'm gonna put a picture of it here. If you've watched that film, this does a really good job of explaining sort of the nuances of the law as it pertains to reservation land, and how difficult it is for people that live on reservation to get help from the law. They literally can't get the help that they need. Okay, it's like their hands are tied, and nobody wants to get involved, basically. So this is why this main character has the job that he has. So basically, when there is a wrongdoing within the reservation, parents, people will come to him. We need your help. There's a wrong that needs to be righted, and we want you to do it. This book opens with a bang, okay? We have this guy basically just like distributing retribution on another character in the book, and it was just so insanely well done. Grabbed me by the neck right away. I was so excited about this book. So his entire job for the reservation is basically to fix things for people that need things fixed with his fists. And he's also just sort of this guy that does whatever. There is a really long story as to why he's like that, and I think the book did a really good job of highlighting why he is the way he is, why he does what he does to try and fit in and do his part for the tribe. So basically, one of the elders comes to him and says, I need you to find this guy. He's causing a lot of trouble. This is where I last saw him. You need to handle this for me. So he goes on this job, and while he's on this job, his nephew gets tangled up in drugs and all this trouble, and he has to kind of put on pause what he's doing to come back and deal with this family issue. And then the further we get into the book, we realize that everything is sort of connected in a much bigger way, and that he has stepped into a mess that he may not be able to get him or his nephew out of. Like I said, as I'm giving you this story, there's so much more depth to this story than what I'm giving you, because we're not just getting this like vigilante story, and we're not just getting this crime story where he's trying to find this guy that's causing a lot of trouble while he's still trying to take care of his nephew. There's a lot of other things happening on this book, a lot of tribal politics happening, a lot of residential law happening, a lot of outside influence happening too, and how it affects how everything works inside their tribe and inside the reservation. We're also having a lot of talks about what it means to live on the res when you don't really feel like you belong there, but you don't have anywhere else to go. And this is a really big part of our main character's story, as he doesn't feel like he belongs there, and everyone has sort of treated him like an outcast most of his life. And it plays a very big part in the role that he plays on reservation. This book ended up being so much more complex than I was expecting, and I absolutely loved that about it, because it gave me so much more than I was asking for. There's also this really great second chance love story in this book that I absolutely love. Like I said, when you put it all out there like that, like, it doesn't sound like anything's gonna work. It worked so well together though. Everything worked incredibly well, and I love how much work Weiden put into this to make it work. It didn't feel like he was forcing it. It didn't feel slow. The pace was great. I did this on audio, loved it, okay? I can't recommend this book enough. This really just like livened it up for me. I don't know. I know I read this year. Now I can't remember when I read it, but this was my first time reading this author, and I think this is his first standalone novel. I think he does a lot of anthologies and stuff, like collection works. This is one of the only ones that is a standalone book though, like that he's just written. But I'm excited to see what he comes out with next, because I really liked this one. Okay, that's all I have for you guys today. Those are my top 5. Like I said, a few of them, well, I mean, all of them I've talked about on my channel because I've read them all and reviewed them at some point. But I know the Michelle Good book and the Cherie Dimaline book have definitely been on my top Indigenous books before. They're just so freaking good, okay? All the books on this list are so good, and I feel like it's a really good smattering of genres and things like that. If you want to go check out some of my other posts I've done, there are also other really good books on those lists as well. I would love to tell you about every book I've read by an Indigenous author that I really liked, but that list would be really, really long and I would probably bore you to death. I absolutely loved all of these stories, and they're ones that I will cherish forever. So I hope you found something that you would like to read on this list today. Make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know I'm posting. I post every week, and that's all I have for you guys today. Like I said, next week will be the maybe series, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, then the month will be over. If you're traveling for the holidays, please be safe, have fun, enjoy your family, read a book by an Indigenous author this month, talk about it with your friends. Let me know in the comments if you have any recommendations for me. That's all I have for you guys today, so I'll see you all next time. Bye!